Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. When I started this podcast in 2019, Dr. Kelly Flanagan was one of my inaugural guests, and his episode, The Gifts of Creativity, remains one of my favorites. Kelly has just published his first novel, The Unhiding of Elijah Campbell, and I wanted to talk to him about how that experience differed from writing nonfiction and about the book itself. We delve into those questions and various subjects raised by the book, including how we look outside ourselves and sometimes to our creative work to find our worth, the value of letting out our wild sides, how the things we do for security often actually undermine us, and how Kelly sees the intersection of spirituality and creativity. As an added bonus, we have a copy of the book to give away to a listener. Stay tuned to hear those details at the end. I think you'll really enjoy this very rich conversation with Dr. Kelly Flanagan. Kelly, welcome back to Follow Your Curiosity.
Thank you for having me back, Nancy.
I'm excited, and I'm not going to lie. I finished your book this morning.
You did?
I did.
Yay.
Kelly Flanagan, you made me cry, and you did it a couple of times.
Oh, well, that feels really good to hear. As a new novelist, I was going to say,
yeah, that means you did what you were trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So since you've been here before, I'm not going to ask you how you got started writing. If people want to find that out, they can go check out your other episode. But I am curious to know what convinced you that you should try to write a novel, and how that experience went for you compared to the writing that you had done before.
Wow, yeah. So it's interesting that you say what convinced you to write a novel, because this is the irony. And we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation. I have, in one way or another, wanted to write a novel for at least 25 years, going back to graduate school. And I started like a half a dozen novels back then, and life got busy. And so I've wanted to do that for 25 years. And so in the process of the current project that you just finished, in the process of it evolving, the publisher, I basically sent them a proposal for a nonfiction project. And they replied with, "We think this would be better as a novel or as a fictional book." And I literally said, "No, you must have misunderstood me. Let me repropose this." I tried to convince them to let me write another nonfiction book. They came back again and said, "Well, here, we think this would be better as, even more so now, we think this would be better as fiction." And I said, "Well, talk to my agent." I said, "What are they, do we need to just, they're clearly not understanding. Do we need to pitch an entirely different concept?" And Kathy's so great. She just said, "Well, spend a month with it and see where this goes." This idea of writing fictional story. And it went some pretty amazing places. And over the course of about 6 or 7 months, I wrote a novel. And the day after I finished the manuscript, I was out for a walk with a friend. And I told him, I said, "I finished the novel." And he said, "So have you sent it to your agent or your editor yet?" And I said, "No, and I'm thinking about not sending it, because I think I really need to write a nonfiction book right now about following your passion." And he looks at me and he goes, "How can you write a nonfiction book about following your passion if you're not following your passion for becoming a novelist?" Right? And I was like, "Yeah, this is hard to look in the mirror if I didn't send this one in." So I did, and you got to read the fruits of all that labor.
But how did it feel when you sat down to actually play with it? I mean, was it what you expected writing fiction to be, or were you constantly having to try to pull yourself out of nonfiction mode?
Good question. So I think part of the process for me was surrendering to the direction I've been going in my writing already. So, my blog posts in my first book, Lovable, are very story oriented. Like, there's a story and then there's a teaching point based upon that story, and it pretty much alternates. By the time I published True Companions, when you look it's a nonfiction book, but there's at least 3 scenes where or 3 whole chapters where I'm just imagining something in my, the book starts off with me imagining joining my younger self on his wedding day. and sort of telling him kind of the advice I'd have on his wedding day. And then there's a chapter in the middle of the book where I imagine my younger self joining me on a particularly lonely night and how we would dialogue about that. And the book concludes with me imagining all my lost loved ones sort of gathering together in me. And it's like, I was writing fiction within a nonfiction book in a lot of ways. So clearly that yearning was in me. I had to sort of acknowledge that I had that yearning and I needed to pursue it. I'll tell you the biggest difference between the two forms of writing was, I feel like with writing nonfiction, you have a lot of control. Like you have a point that you're trying to make for the reader over the course of the book, and you're sort of like engineering to get the reader to that conclusion. So it feels like it's a lot about controlling the arc of the book, whereas with writing fiction, it was about learning to let go of control, to think that you know where the next few scenes are going to go, and then to watch the characters do something totally different, which is why for me writing fiction was X number of times more joyful than writing nonfiction. It was like I was getting to be the first reader in a way. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that. I didn't see that coming. And that happened over and over again. And so one of the things that I've already shared with several people is that like this was transformative for me. I started to realize in the midst of writing this, if I'm struggling to let my characters sort of be in control of themselves and become who they want to be, like how much more am I doing that in my life to my people, like struggling to let them have control of their own lives and become who they want to be. And so it's been really transformative at a personal level too, to try to live the way I write, which is to allow the people in my world to do and be what they want to do and be.
Yeah, that is, I wrote my novel long enough ago that I don't think that I had the clarity to see it that way, but I know, for a lot of people who are writing fiction for the first time, the minute that a character does something that they didn't expect or talks back to them or, just plain says, nope, sorry, you want me to turn left, I'm going to the right and you can deal. They think they've lost their minds. And so, it's a really freaky experience. And I remember when it happened to me, it's like, okay, I'm going completely nuts because I'm having an argument with this character about where he's from, and he's not listening to me.
Oh, good. Well, and you've read the story, so I can remember that specific moment. I love the way you just articulated that. It was, and I won't ruin, no spoilers, but Elijah is leaving his dad's law office after having remembered the experience he had there. And I had it plotted that he was supposed to go from there to have another sort of deep conversation with the grandparent. And he's like, I'm not going to talk to anybody. I got too much to process right now. I need to go find a quiet space and just sort this out. And he ends up in a park, and it becomes sort of a pivotal scene in the book, which I hadn't planned at all. And the person who shows up in that scene, I hadn't planned for them to show up. So yeah, like that really resonates with what you just said. Like I had been planning to do a totally different thing. It's like, nope, not going to go do that.
Yeah, I think that moment is when the characters really become real, when they start to talk with you and talk back to you and have their own views on things. It's like, wow, now we're really cooking with gas, it's like, now let's see where this is going to go. I always worry when they stop talking to me, usually means that I've taken a break that was a little bit too long, and hi, I'm back. No, really, come talk to me again,
Right.
But yeah, when
like
they start with that, they take on a life of their own in a way that I had occasionally heard people talk about before I really started writing fiction. And then, in fact, when I was in high school, I did a paper on an author that I didn't really care about. It was assigned, And I remember reading something about, I wanted to do this, but my characters wanted to do that. And in my 16-year-old infinite brilliance, my response was, what are you talking about? You're the writer. You can make them do whatever you want. And that day that I was having that argument with that character, I was like, yeah, okay, I guess you can't actually do that.
Turns out I didn't know everything when I was 16.
What were the odds, right?
Right. Precisely. Yes.
But that actually brings to mind a quote that really struck me. And the interesting thing about this quote was that in the moment when I read it, I thought, wow, I think there's so much truth to that. But it felt
Mm,
almost not like a throwaway line, but like a line that was just there to be observed and move on. And
mm,
then it clearly grew into something more, especially by the end of the book, where Elijah says, I think it's Elijah, we humans try to make things more beautiful by making them more ordered. Maybe God makes things more beautiful by letting them grow more wild.
mm, yeah.
And I think, because as I thought about it, as I went through the book, I thought, yeah, the order, how much of order, because I am not anti-order, but I
Right.
wonder sometimes how much order is more about control than about
So,
peace,
yes.
and how much we use it to avoid letting
Yes.
ourselves become more wild.
Yes. You picked up on a theme that definitely, um, and that's another thing. The characters don't just do what they want to do. They also tell you more precisely what the theme is, right? You have greater clarity by the time you're done with it, and that is certainly developed into one of the themes of the book. That the title of the book's "The Unhiding of Elijah Campbell." So, you know, the the idea that Elijah was definitely keeping secrets for good reasons because he was trying to protect his people and trying to love them well, but also that selfish desire to be in control of his life, right, and to make sure it's going the way that he wants it to go. And his trajectory is definitely one from beginning to recognize that his controlled life is not nearly as beautiful as a life where he's beginning to let go and let it be and let people be and sort of settling into the expansiveness and the beauty of that. And the scene that you just described was one where he is returning to an old abandoned golf course, and he remembered that the field of flowers were beautiful, but now that the course has gone wild, they're even more beautiful. And the first time, sort of in his story, that he's actually contemplating really letting go of control and letting his life grow more wild and more beautiful. So yeah, I appreciate that you put your finger on that sort of hinge in that theme.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was going to be such a theme at the time, but
Mhm.
I just,
Me either,
you know,
as you point out.
funny how that happens.
Huh?
Yeah, but I think there's really something in that, especially like, I live in New Jersey where even now somehow they are finding more places to build on. And it's like,
Sure.
can we have a little something that's still green and has dandelions and, thistles and all the things that we think are bad
Mm,
growing in it, just, plus all of the stuff that's pretty and nice. Can we have some place that's still like that? I mean, even the park next to my house is largely
interesting.
lawn. It's
Manicured,
it's
right?
manicured. It's got some areas that aren't so much, but aside from the deer that come in to roam
Mm,
around a little bit, it's largely controlled.
it's interesting. Yeah, we were vacationing or we were visiting friends in Madison, Wisconsin this summer, and we observed that I don't know if it's a landscaping trend or like decades long cultural sort of norm, but a lot of the lawns and landscaping around homes have like large areas of just wild flower, and how much we enjoyed that rather than just sort of the manicured grass everywhere. There's a special beauty as you drive around that city that you don't see in a lot of cities. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
We
wish.
have zero grass at our house, just so you know. Zero grass. Literally don't need a lawnmower. We love wild things growing around our house.
That's fantastic. I actually saw someone local had posted on Nextdoor maybe a month or so ago trying to explain what they were doing with their lawn, that they
Mm,
wanted to make it more wild. And it was fascinating to watch that conversation, especially the comments from the neighbor across the street
oh,
who
I
did
bet people
not
have
think
strong
that that
opinions.
was such a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
also made me think kind of, of what we were just talking about, the fact that the more you try to control your creative work, the
Mhm.
more you're kind of forcing it to contort itself into something that it doesn't want to be. which may even be how you get stuck and you get blocked because you're not realizing that no, it doesn't want to
Mm,
be this thing. It doesn't want to be a nonfiction book, Kelly. It wants to be a novel.
right, exactly. Exactly. It's, you know, and maybe as a growing artist, I think so much of it is about realizing that you're not creating the beauty. You're creating space for it to sort
Mm-hmm.
of surface or manifest. And so you don't have to be real ordered in order to make that happen. You just have to show up and sort of be a conduit. And there's a, and I think that's another one of the joys of it. And it's a deepening of faith that, oh, like reality is beautiful in and of itself at its foundation. And we can allow it to sort of take place. We don't have to be constantly controlling it to make it beautiful. We actually sort of diminish it if we're trying to do that. So I definitely learned that while writing the book. And I think Elijah learned that while living through the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge theme, and I found myself loving it but also wrestling with, okay, it's easy to read about a fictional character doing this, but it's totally different to try to do it in your own life. The
Mm-hmm.
moment where he's having the conversation and security comes up and the idea of clinging to security.
Mm.
Like
Yes.
all of our conventional wisdom is about
Mm.
clinging to security. You
Yes.
buy the house because that's more secure. You don't leave one job without another one because, oh, the end of the world
Right.
might happen, And and so we're kind of trained to do that. And then when you
Mm.
encounter the idea that security is not something you can hang on to forever,
Yes.
and a lot of security, I think, is an illusion. But
Mm.
even when you realize it's an illusion, it can still be really hard to let go of the illusion.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of that movie, The Matrix, right? Where
Oh, yeah.
there are characters in the movie who prefer the illusion of the
Hmm.
stability and the security and um, yeah, um, I guess it ties in with that idea of the wild. I think if you think of like maybe half of life is actually safe and half of it is totally unpredictable and vulnerable, scary and risky and dangerous and all of that. Well, if you're trying to stay in security, you're like only getting to live like half of life. And there's something really beautiful about living it all. Uh, taking your bumps and your bruises and the pain and living it all, sort of like that being the goal rather than just the safe stuff. Um, which is again exactly what Elijah learns to do over the course of the book.
Yeah. And I think, oh, I didn't copy this quote, but there's a moment in the book that goes along with that conversation about security
Mm-hmm.
where, it's like, no, heaven is knowing that whatever happens to you, you're going to be okay.
Yes.
Which was just like, yeah, yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that. I can feel that as I read it.
Mm.
And yet it's still so hard to let go of that idea that if you don't know what's going to happen to you, which is crazy because you can't ever know what's going to happen
Because
to
you
you,
can't
right?
ever. That's right. That's right.
That you're doing something wrong and it's going to kill you, it's going to ruin you, all of these horrible, nightmare monsters come up in your head.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, you can just feel the release of the idea of being
Mm.
like, whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. You can feel it when you hear it, when you say it, when you read it, and yet it still feels so elusive.
As you're sort of pinpointing that, I'm realizing how much of that conversation is influenced by my day job as a therapist, and a therapist to parents and teenagers and kids and that kind of thing, and just like how how much more valuable it is to develop resilience than it is to preserve safety, and so and they're almost mutually exclusive. Like if we keep our kids in a perfectly safe environment where they never go through hardship, never feel pain, never learn how to get back up, they can't develop resilience, because resilience is just the awareness that I've got what it takes to get through even when things are hard, essentially. And so that scene is really trying to articulate that resilience is a much more valuable human experience to cultivate than safety. actually, because safety is temporary and transient and mostly an illusion, but resilience is something you can believe in.
Yeah. I think most of us have learned to be attached to safety, maybe even addicted to safety, to the point where we don't even realize how much we've boxed ourselves in by it, which is kind of the theme of the whole book.
Yes. Well, yeah, I'm a recovering safety addict myself, so I know the feeling.
So, what helped you recover from that safety addiction?
Well, probably like any recovery, I'm going through periods of sobriety and relapse. So I wouldn't want to pretend that I'm anywhere arrived. That's another conversation, right? In the book about not thinking you're ever going to arrive. But
Yes.
what has helped me? Um, I think it's like so many things. There comes some point where the coping method or the defense mechanism or the protective instinct actually starts to create more suffering than it's preventing. And you start to question it and go, oh, like my efforts to be safe, keep life sterile, keep things in control, it's doing damage to my relationship with my kids. It's doing damage to my relationship with my wife. Um, I'm not I'm not writing as well. I think it's when the thing that worked for so long quits working, you start to ask bigger questions, and that's another one of the themes of the book, right? Like the ways that we survive eventually start to harm us more than helping us to survive. So we have to call them into question and find new ways, find new things we're pursuing. So I think that's for me, and it probably started 14 years ago now, finally calling into question the value of keeping everything safe and control and secure and going, you know what, you're hurting a lot of people with all the efforts to do all that. I remember I ruined almost every Mother's Day morning trying to make it just the right thing. I would ruin it though. I'd be so frustrated that the kids weren't participating and it wasn't going to plan, and it turns out, you end up doing a lot of damage with that effort to control everything. So I'm on a 14-year path of recovery so far.
It is ironic, though, that it's the thing that you're doing to try to make something great that's ruining it.
It's ruining it. Yeah.
I think it takes us a lot of times more time than it feels like it should or that we wish it would before it dawns on us that that's what it is that's screwing things up.
Well, another version of that, work with people on all the time is, have you ever tried to force a loved one to be happy? Does that ever work for you? Like it turns out trying to force or convince someone to be happy actually makes them less happy. And so you actually eventually have to call in or you either keep doing the same thing and getting the same results and making everybody miserable, or you go, maybe I can't force people to be happy. Maybe I can't make that happen. Maybe I can do something different with my time in this role. Maybe loving doesn't look like making them happy. Maybe it looks like holding space for their unhappiness. And so you start to just ask different questions about better ways to be.
That's what you just said about maybe loving is more holding space for their unhappiness. That is, because one of the things that I've been thinking about since I finished the book like 4 hours ago is that the whole idea, and I have, kind of been asking myself this question for a while. I think about what I saw as a kid, what I watched on TV, the books that I've read, the movies that I've seen. And I find myself a lot of the time saying to myself, do I actually know what love is? Because I think it's the things that I've seen in all of these places that we put on screens and we write in books, and there's that moment in your book where Elijah has to face the fact that hanging on, he's confused for love, and maybe that's not what it is. And I thought, yet again, okay, do I really know what this is? I mean, I have two little nephews that, I would take a bullet for without a second thought. That's as close as I get to what it actually is. And even that, I don't think really covers the whole thing.
Right.
It's like there are things that I know that I love, but what does real love actually look like as opposed to the idea that we are sold all the time? And I have a feeling that I am far from the only one who feels a little bit like, maybe this thing I was sold isn't the real deal. So then what is the real deal?
That's a great way to put it. This thing I was sold is not the real deal. Then that's precisely what Elijah starts to realize over the course of the book, is because I do think we go around sincerely going, oh, I'm loving you best anyone can. But that depends upon what your definition of love is. So that could mean something very different from person to person. And so we were sold this sort of experience. We called it love. And maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's different than that. I know for me, like one of the insights that's come out of writing this book is I was sort of sold on the idea that love is agreement. Like if we love each other, we'll all find a way to agree. I suppose you could say that's what's happening in our country right now as well, and in our world. If we're all going to be together, we all have to agree. But love can be holding space for disagreement. There's nothing more loving than that. To go, you have a difference of opinion, a difference of belief, and I'll still hold space here with you, be present to you. So I'm learning that love has the capacity to be in disagreement, actually, and to still be with each other. So yeah, I think it's a worthy question for all of us to ask. What's my definition of love? What snuck its way in early on, and how might I start to question that and expand that a little bit?
Yeah. And along with that, I love the scene where Elijah is talking to his uncle, and his uncle explains to him what proxies of worth are. Because I thought about that not only in how we relate to ourselves, but how so many creative people look at their worth in terms of how much people like what they created, which can go so far wrong in so many ways. You know, if you're showing your work to people who just don't like that kind of work, it doesn't mean your work is bad. It means they just don't like that kind of work. But if you take it as your work is bad, you should stop doing this, you're a terrible person, you're a terrible creative person, you're never going to be an artist, or whatever flavor of creativity you're going to be, it's going to really mess with you in really big ways.
Yeah, it is. It is so tempting. Yeah, right. Book sales, royalty payments, all these number things. I'll tell you, one of my favorite, probably one of the greatest moments of grace I ever experienced was right after we got the first quarterly royalty report from my first book, Lovable. And, as a first-time author, you've got these wild numbers, like that you have decided that would be successful. That'd be a nice proxy. I'd feel worthy as an author and it was not even half of that. And so I'm on the phone with my agent, Kathy, and I said, and she seemed really happy. And I was like, Kathy, like, are these numbers low? And she said to me, she was, well, Kelly, if you wanted to fill your trunk full of books and tour the country and neglect your family for a year, yeah, I think you could have sold more books. But for an introverted psychologist who loves his family and lives in the woods, I think you did pretty good, right? And it was like my agent, who was supposed to be concerned with these proxies for worth, was just going, hey, you are who you are. Embrace that. Keep making art that reflects who you are, and let the rest take care of itself. And so since then, my main goal for any project has just been that I measure its success as whether or not I get to make something else after it, right? And so far, I keep getting to make something else. And that's up to us mostly, not other people, right? We can keep making things. And so as long as we're committed to that process, our creative craft is a success. I think that's where I land these days.
Right. I mean, no one can stop you from writing another book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or writing another blog post or whatever, even if your agent says, sorry, we're done. Like nothing can stop you from continuing to do that if you decide that that's important to you and there's stuff that needs to come out of you.
That's right. Well, and Kathy cautioned me, my agent. So they did ask for fiction. They did not ask for a novel. They said fiction. They were thinking more of some shorter form situational sort of fiction for the concept. And I came back to Kathy and said, you told me to sit with it for a month, and I got this idea, and I think I need to go with it. And she said most authors have 3, 4, 5 novels in the drawer before they can ever get one published. It's a hard thing to do. But what that's telling you is that most published authors out there kept going at their craft, even when the proxies for worth weren't there, the numbers weren't there, the reactions weren't there. So I'm grateful you've named that today, because I think anybody who's creative and listening needs to just be encouraged, keep making things.
Yeah. And it's not
Yeah,
about the numbers. It's not about the likes and the shares and the follows and all of that. It's about it being important to you to make what you make and you doing that.
yeah, and I mean, if you want to have, this goes to the conversation in the book about joy and happiness. You could say happiness is related to the numbers, joy is related to the making, right?
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is transient. It depends on circumstances. A lot of it's good luck and bad luck. But joy is the process of taking something that wants to come out through you and putting it into the world and manifesting it. And most creatives understand the joy of that. So keep being joyful.
Right. I mean, that's why you started creating something in the first place, because it
Yeah.
gave you joy to do it. And I think it's so easy to lose track of that in terms of how many did I sell, or how many people liked
Mhm.
it, or, who said what about it. And it's not fundamentally about that. It's about the joy of actually creating the thing.
That's right. Well, and I think one of the significant ways that happiness and joy are different as well is that happiness doesn't have room for unhappiness. And as soon as somebody becomes unhappy, they're no longer happy. But I think joy has room for sorrow in it and struggle. Like I think you can make something out of joy, and there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. There's a lot of struggle. There's moments of disappointment, but it doesn't necessarily diminish the joy. It actually there's a richer joy that happens when you say, I'm dedicating myself to this thing. I'm going to keep making this thing, even though it's a struggle at times. So yeah, that to me that's the reason to make things more so than those proxies for worth, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I also was thinking this morning, obviously unhiding is a pretty big theme of the book. It ended up in the title. But,
Right.
all of those things that Elijah hides, that we all hide, seem to me, to different degrees, to kind of relate to the shadow concept of, the
Mm,
stuff that we tuck away about ourselves because we don't think that it's good enough. And sometimes we know what those things are, and sometimes we don't.
yes.
But there's also, in addition to the idea that when you stop doing that, you allow for more joy in your life, there's also a great deal that you can do with all of those things creatively when you let
Mm,
those
oh man.
shadow things and those hidden things out onto the
Yes.
page, or your sculpture, or your music, or whatever.
Yes. So one of the ideas that I'm sort of taken with recently is that a definition of joy is the experience of freely allowing life to flow through you. And it doesn't matter if the life is easy stuff to feel and to experience or hard stuff. If you can let it freely flow through you, that feels joyful. And I think that's what you're getting at. Like when we have a shadow side, all the stuff we're ashamed of, we think is unacceptable, can't bring out into the light. We've literally stopped letting life flow through us. It's sort of stuck in there. And so to create art, allowing that shadow stuff to flow again, I think that's part of what the joy is. It's
Hmm.
life is flowing through us again. It's not all stopped up and contained in there and festering. So I think that as art can be healing in that way, in addition to just joyful in that way. So I think that's a great word.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something else that actually made me stop reading for a second
Mhm.
toward the beginning of the book, when Elijah has a session with his therapist, and his therapist tells him that anxiety and anger can't exist at the same time. So if he's ever feeling
Mm.
really anxious, he should just get really pissed off about it. And
Yes,
I stopped and I thought, wait, does that mean that the cure for my stage fright is to get really mad about it? And I
that's so
started
funny.
kind of picturing that, because I thought, I've dealt with this my entire life. I think I could get pretty mad about it.
Uh-huh. It'll work. I can tell you as a psychologist, it will work. They're just these mutually exclusive. I mean, you think about like when you're faced with a threat, we all know about the fight or flight, right?
Hmm.
It's not fight and flight. You can't do both at the same time. You can't fight the thing, the threat, and flee it. The flight is anxiety, it moves me away from the thing I fear. The anger is I move towards it and attack it, right? And so yeah, you can't move in two directions at once. So it'll work, I promise.
I'm definitely going to have to give it a whirl, because I was so fascinated by that. And it reminded me of what I've heard about you can't be in fear and curiosity at the same time too.
Yes,
That, yeah.
absolutely. Yes, because curiosity is an unangry way of moving toward the thing,
Yeah.
whereas fear is always moving away from the thing, resisting it, trying to run away from it. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. It was just that one little moment, but I was like,
Uh,
ooh,
Ooh, I can use that. That's great. I'm glad it was practically useful.
trying to imagine singing while angry. It's like that. That could lend a whole different angle to so many things.
Oh yeah, it's good.
So many things. I mean, there are just so many things buried in, well, not buried, but that,
Mm,
little moments like that. Like that is not one of the larger
sure,
revelations, that it is not a moment where I cried.
sure.
But it still was like, oh, look at that.
Uh,
That's kind of cool.
yeah.
I've never heard that one before, and other little things that there's you threw a lot of stuff into this book.
Well, one of my favorite things I've heard so far from readers is that I read it the first time for the story. Like the story just swept me along, and I just needed to know how it ended. But I've gone back to read the second time to go just slowly and sort of absorb. Um, because yeah, one of the concepts here is that um, Ellie goes through his healing trajectory by having these conversations with lost loved ones in his memory and imagination. And each one of those conversations, I think, is just really rich in some sort of principle idea around transformation and healing. And so, I mean, I've read it countless times now, obviously through all the revisions, but I'm actually reading it one more time, about 2/3 of the way through. I think I'll finish today, just to do exactly what you said, pull out quotes,
Mm-hmm.
for sharing purposes and that kind of thing. And yeah, and there's a lot of meaty quotes in there that you could sort of camp out on and
Yeah.
sort of journal on for a while. But I do think the story itself keeps you from getting bogged down in those the first time through.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And it does, I mean, it really does move. And
it
admittedly,
moves.
I mean, I have read this a little bit more quickly than I might have otherwise, though, the longest chunk of time that I spent with it was yesterday, and it certainly was not like I wanted to put it down. It was
Mm,
just like
thank you.
you have to keep going, or at least I did. I told a friend it was like a freight train. Once it starts up, stay out of
Oh,
its way, because here it comes. And
that's
when it
that's
hits you,
great.
you're gonna cry. But
Mhm.
there was another quote that really struck me, because this was another thing I had never heard before. Regret is really just a way of denying our ordinariness. It's a way of
Mm,
pretending we aren't, all of us, always growing and evolving and learning. It's a way of insisting we should be finished when in reality, all of us are always in process.
mm,
And that was
yeah,
kind of another moment where I thought, oh, wow,
yeah.
that's just so much better a way of
Mm,
looking at these things, because again, it's a control thing, right? Like we think
yes.
that we have to be done, we think we have to be ready, and how can we possibly? I mean, it is my 51st birthday today, and I
Oh
can
my
tell
goodness!
you
Happy
that I
birthday!
thank you, that I certainly, the things that I thought I knew when I was
Oh,
25 or 31 or 41 or even
mm,
a couple of years ago don't look the same way now. And how could they? You think that you think you know everything when you're 16 and you're writing that paper about
yes,
the author.
yes, you do.
But you don't. But you somehow, I think human beings continue to think that we know everything
Mm,
that we need to know. But I think as we get older, we start to realize how much we don't know too, and start to ask more questions of it anyway. But
mm,
yeah, that thing that I wrote in fourth grade could not possibly be like the thing that I wrote when I was 40.
right.
There's no way. You
Yes.
are at that place, and you do what you can with what you have at that place. And
Yes.
then the next time when you know more, you do something different. And again, why does no one tell us this when we're
Oh,
kids?
right. Exactly. I hope young people will pick up this book. My 18-year-old read it and liked it.
That
And
is high
speaking of
praise from an
him,
18-year-old, especially when it's
it
your own
is.
child.
It is, and he did not feel the same way about my nonfiction works, but he definitely, I think, appreciated the story here. Well, it makes me that paragraph about regret is just sort of denial of our ordinariness. It's helped that concept has helped me through the last couple of months, because we just launched him, and he has been telling us for 5 years that he has no interest in college. He's going to move to Chicago and get a job and try to make it as a comedian in the city. We really launched him into adulthood a couple of years ago, and in that transitional moment, I think 10 years ago, I would have just been torn apart by regret. Like, why didn't I do more of this with him? Why didn't I do more of that with him? Why didn't I? And the answer is because I'm ordinary. Because I was figuring it out as I went, and then hopefully get another crack at it someday as a grandfather and know more and prioritize better. But the things that I regret are just signs of, I was just an ordinary dude trying to figure out how to be a dad. Another one of the ways I've been thinking of that recently is, like, I tried so hard to be the greatest, best dad, and yet my son Aiden sort of probably treats me a lot like I think about my dad, with all my disappointments and frustrations and all of that. So what I say these days is, I'm not becoming my dad, but I'm definitely becoming Aiden's dad. I am an ordinary dad, no matter how hard I try, because to him, I'm his only version, and there's going to be disappointments and frustrations and that sort of thing. So yes, this concept of regret is just denial of our ordinariness. It's been freeing. It's been graceful. Doesn't mean you quit trying. It doesn't mean you don't kind of give it your all, but it just means that your all is going to be probably somewhere in the ordinary at most things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the quote about humility comes shortly after that one, that humility is just realizing that you're not ever going to get there. And those two things, again, it was one of these moments of, okay, so I don't actually have to regret stuff if I give myself a little freedom to be human and ordinary and not know any better because I just didn't know any better in that particular moment. And now
Absolutely.
I do. And so next time, that's not what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. To give yourself I just don't know too many people who aren't doing the best that they can. I just maybe there's a few out there, but yeah, whoever's listening, give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You're probably doing the best you can. And that comes with all sorts of trial and error. So no need to regret, just keep going.
Yeah. I remember hearing an interview with, I think it must have been the director, Jim Sheridan, when the movie In the Name of the Father came out. And it was another similar moment, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, when he said, most people do not set out to do the wrong thing.
Right.
They set out to do what they believe is the right thing.
That's right.
And so, I mean, it certainly is true that plenty of people have done horrible things in the name of doing what they thought was the right thing. So that's not me letting people off the hook, but it really gave me a different way to look at some of the things that I had experienced and some of the people that I had known, and said, okay, but they were doing what they genuinely believed what was the right thing, or they wouldn't have done that.
Well, I mean, probably an even greater tragedy is a person who knows at some level they're doing the wrong thing, and it's still the best that they can do, right? Because now they're living, the best they can do is to live in the reality of doing something that they know is wrong. So you can almost find a greater sort of empathy for that person. They're living a little bit of a hell of their own creation in a sense, but it's still the best they can do right now.
Right. And that's so incredibly human too. I think we all have those moments where we lose it more than we wish we would, or, we just can't bring ourselves for whatever reason to do the thing that we wish we could do.
And see, last night, my 15-year-old drove the car for the first time. Actually, it was the fourth time. And he thought he could pull into the garage, and he did great pulling into the garage. And then when he got in there, he hit the accelerator.
Oh!
Yes, he did. And I wasn't. except I think I actually was at my best. I think the way I handled it, good as I could do it last night. And I hope that it was enough for him to not be hurt by. But did the best I could, but it didn't look great. I'll tell you that.
But that's also why the next morning exists, right? So you can go and say, hey, I did the best I could last night, but I'm not going to lie. I was having a hard time and I wish I had done better.
I still haven't seen him, but I think my line is going to be, okay, so just for now, let's be clear. There are two petals and they do different things. Is that too, and then I'm going to say, is that too soon? And we'll see how he handles that.
Oh, I'm also imagining his own horror at, oh dear
Oh,
God, what
exactly.
have I just done? The entire world is going to collapse on my head
Yeah.
and I can't believe what I just did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, it was actually a relatively safe way to learn a particular lesson. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
we're doing the
Boy.
best we can.
Well, I wanted to make sure that we have a couple of minutes to talk about the
Sure.
spiritual side of creativity, since
Mm.
you are obviously a deeply spiritual guy. This is a more Christian oriented book, though I think anyone could read it and,
Mm.
substitute in whatever their particular idea of the divine or God happens to be and get just as much out of it. I don't think the label is as important as the idea behind it
Mm.
myself, but I've been interested in how spirituality and creativity intertwine, because I think that they really overlap a lot, and I'm
Mhm.
wondering what you may have noticed with this book
Mm.
and with the other ones, or just in general.
So, gosh, we should start another hour right
I
now
know that's
because
part of why I
that's such
asked
a
you how
great
much time you had.
question. Oh, yes, because this is a conversation I could have all day.
Well, maybe we'll have to do part two.
maybe we could, and well, and what would be fun about it is we'll both discover new things, and
Hmm.
if you spend enough time on it, so I would say thank you for sort of naming that. So I was raised in the Christian faith. Um, the Christian faith that I practice now is almost the opposite of the one that I was raised in. So it is not a monolithic thing. Um, and the way I say it these days is that my Christian faith is more lens than agenda. Like it helps me to see the world in a way that is most loving for me. And but I don't have an agenda for anybody. That's why I think you say that about the book. Like my lens is there for sure, and some of my language, but no one will feel any sort of pressure. Um, Spirituality and creativity, I actually can't disentangle the two. I think creativity is one of the purest expressions of spirituality. Um, I believe, we talked about this with Lovable, I believe that we come into the world with a true self, a soul, and that soul is sort of the source of all of our creativity. But that soul gets banged up, it gets hurt, it gets wounded. The way I've been thinking of it is the soul is like a sponge, and it's supposed to soak up love and then squeeze that love out in the form of love and creativity everywhere it goes. But a lot of times when we were young, sponge soaked up pain. And so when that happened, we started to create a protective layer around our sponge and false self or an ego. And that part of us can use the soul to create, but it's not creativity in its purest form. So spirituality is about reconnecting with what is most original, most true, most innocent in us, which is our soul, and then allowing that thing to express itself through making something. So I had this conversation. I told a church going person, of which I am, less regularly than I thought was allowed when I was a kid. But I told them that I was writing something on a Sunday morning, and they're like, "Why weren't you at church?" I was like, "I was at church. I was in front of the keyboard. I'm never more connected with the divine than when I'm doing that. Like I'm taking orders, I feel like, at that point, and surrendered. And that is deeply spiritual." So anyways, that's a long winding kind of introductory answer to your question about the two. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so interesting. The idea of spirituality equals being in a particular building at a particular time doing a particular thing, rather
Sure.
than,
Right.
no, I am communing with whatever divine thing is putting this idea in me and making me want to get it out of myself, is amazing, and also reminds me of the scene in the book where Father Lou comes and sees Elijah and says, "Shouldn't you be in church?" And he's like, "Oh, wait, you are in church," because he's outside
Yeah.
in this beautiful place. And yeah, I think I think there are so many ways to see that intersection and to express that intersection, and that we think a lot of the time of creativity as, oh, you're going to go write your little story, you know? I mean, that's kind of
Mm.
what I heard as a kid. Was not that condescending, but it kind of boiled down to that, right? Oh, she's
Felt
downstairs
that,
writing a
yeah.
story, you know?
Mm.
Or yeah, you have to go and play your guitar or whatever. And we don't realize, you know, we've left it on the margins, and we don't realize that it really is a central part of who we are as human beings. We're here to create, right? You know, I mean, yeah, a beaver will build a dam, but beavers are pretty much stuck with the dams, right? They're
Mm.
not out building
Mm.
houses. They're not
Right.
playing songs. They're, you know, we're the
Mhm.
ones who have this wide range,
Mm.
and we decide that it's just a hobby or it's not important, and it gets left at the bottom of the to-do list until it falls off of the
Mm.
to-do list, and then we wonder why we're not happy one day. And I think it's
Yes.
because we're not interacting with that really divine creative part of ourselves that connects
Yes.
us with everything else.
Absolutely. Well, and again, in the Christian tradition, there's that Genesis story about creation, and that can get used in all sorts of ways. But you know, the tradition that I'm, you know, a part of now, sees creation as unfinished. That God created up to a point in that Genesis story, then created human beings and said, start naming, right? Start putting words to it. Start co-creating with me. And so, like, to me, that's the calling for each of us, is to be creative in our own way, and to recognize that we are all, in one way or another, creating in any given moment. We're creating a better space that we're in, or we're creating a more difficult space that we're in. And so, just to be recognizing that we're sort of inherently creative beings, we're called to create, and that we are at our most joyful when we are creating intentionally with love, essentially. Yeah, for me, it's like, remember The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe
Mm-hmm.
by C.S. Lewis, right? They open up the wardrobe and there's this whole world in there. To me, that's what it's like especially when I was writing fiction. I would sit down with this little idea about the wardrobe and what I was going to be doing for that day, and then the writing session would just open up into this big world where things were happening that I didn't. It's so weird. It's in there somewhere, but there's this space in there that is way bigger than I could possibly imagine. Like, there's something magical and spiritual about entering into that wardrobe and discovering the world in there. So I just, I just can't think of spirituality apart from that sort of creative experience.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've had an experience like this when you're writing yet. I'm going to bet you probably have at least come close. But
Try me.
when I first started writing my own original fiction again, I had been doing some fan fiction stuff for a while, and I was like, I want to, you know, do something of my own. I found a first line online and decided, okay, that sounds interesting, and threw it into my word processor. And the next thing I know, I had like 3 paragraphs, and I sat there looking at it going, I have no idea where that came from. And over the
Yeah.
course of a weekend, it kept happening like that. I'd go back, I'd read what I had already written, and 3 more paragraphs would pop up. And it
Yeah.
kind of turned into this game like, wow, what's going to happen next? I don't know. And I still don't feel like I wrote that story, because the whole thing was literally, I have no idea where this is coming from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like you're channeling something that came from somewhere else. It happened to me in the middle of writing
Mm-hmm.
my novel, you know, in a similar way, where it just
Yes.
was like this river of words that flew out. And an hour later, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
here they are.
And well, and everywhere, I mean, in so many other places in life, if we, like, feeling passive in that sense would feel terrible. And yet in a
Mm-hmm.
creative space, feeling like a passive sort of recipient or conduit of the creative material it's
It's
great. I mean,
amazing.
it's like the epitome of joyful surrender, right? And so to get to practice joyful surrender is a spiritual practice, right? And here we are as a creative doing that, hopefully as many times as you can when you're sitting down to create. So,
Right.
yeah, I only have a couple minutes, and I have to
know.
ask a question.
Okay.
Nancy,
Yes, sir.
If I was to pick up one piece of work of yours, where should I start?
Wow.
This is like being a therapist and they ask you a question and you're not used to answering the questions, right? I'd love to start.
It's sort of like asking, which of your children is your favorite.
Right, I know.
So I have the one novel. Okay. So if you want a novel, that's your thing.
Okay.
There are a bunch of articles on my website, and so, I don't know. I kind of want to say listen to the podcast because that's really what I've been doing, for the last 4 years.
That's where your creativity.
It's almost exactly 4 years since you and I had our first conversation when I started the podcast, which is amazing. Yes. But, there's so much in there, and I don't know if I could pick a particular episode because I love so many of them.
I love that answer. And let me just say, I can sense in our conversation just how present and the energy and spirit you brought to this conversation. I can feel like that this is a creative thing for you.
Well, and I'll tell you the truth.
Beautiful. Thank you.
That's something I learned from you the first time we talked.
Oh, no way.
Because I had a list of questions and we went through them in about 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I sat here thinking, what do I do now? Yeah. And I thought, well, you're going to have to pay attention and listen and keep the conversation going. And that's what you're going to have to do. And the rest of that conversation was so much more interesting than just, I have these 10 questions to ask you, that I have never done a conversation any other way since then. And I laugh sometimes because people will say, you've researched your people so well. Like, there are people I've talked to that I've really known nothing other than their name and what they do. And it's just listening and asking questions about what they say and paying attention. And I've learned how much we don't listen well. Yeah. One of the big things I learned that day with you. But it changed the way I do these all the time.
So to bring it full circle, somewhere in the middle of our first conversation, you had to wander into the wild, and it was more beautiful.
Yes,
there
it
we
was.
Go.
Yes, it was.
Perfect.
And I don't think I have ever admitted that out loud on this podcast, but if ever there was going to be a moment, it's this one. So
thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for going through questions that quickly.
Sure.
But thank you for coming back, because I loved our first conversation. I love this conversation. You're always welcome to come back anytime you want. So ping me.
Awesome.
And we've got a book giveaway that I will tell people about in the outro, because I know you have to go. But anytime.
Totally delightful.
That is our show for this week. I am always so grateful to Kelly Flanagan for joining me and to you for listening. I promised details about the book giveaway at the end of the show, and here they are. Kelly's publisher has graciously offered a copy of the book to one lucky winner. If you are in the US, that will be a physical book, and if you're elsewhere in the world, it'll be an ebook. To enter, share my Twitter or Instagram post about this episode between now and midnight on November 16th Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. I'll do my best to get these links into your podcast app ASAP to make it super easy for you. But if you don't see them yet, come back and check later, or go take a look at my accounts. Now, this is important. You must tag me to enter, because otherwise I won't have any way of knowing that you shared the post and won't be able to add you to the drawing. So make sure you tag me. Multiple shares will not result in multiple entries, only because, alas, there is only one of me. I will collect the entries in a spreadsheet and use a random number generator to select a winner, and will notify the winner via the account they used to enter. If I can't make contact with the winner after 3 days, I'll choose another winner. I'll do my best to take care of all of this and notify the winner by December 1st. Maybe sooner if we get lucky. I hope you'll enter to win a copy of the book. If the winner okays it, I will share their name in a later episode. Thanks for participating, and good luck. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to get in touch on any of my social platforms or even via email at nancy@fycuriosity.com and tell me what you loved. And if you're feeling a little bit less than confident in your creative process right now, and you haven't yet signed up for my free email series on 6 of the most common creative beliefs that are messing you up, please check it out. It'll untangle those myths and help you get rolling again. You can find it at fycuriosity.com, and there's also a link right in your podcast app. See you there, and see you next week. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. Thanks.